Vivi is already on her way to Elbaf, and I'm 100% sure she'll arrive at the end of the arc. Oda has left many small clues, and all we have to do is ask a few important questions and connect the dots. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. Hope you'll enjoy it. Oda left the biggest hint in the last chapter, but let's go chronologically. We know that Vivi and Wapol are currently on Morgan's airship, and we know they actively followed the events happening at Egghead. We also know that Vivi wanted to find out if Vegapunk's worldwide broadcast revealed anything about Luffy and the crew's location, but Morgan's explained to her that the broadcast was recorded before the Buster Call occurred on the island, so they had no clue. This scene clearly shows us that Vivi is looking for the Straw Hat's location because that's the only place that she can go now. It's dangerous for her to return to Alabasta as the world government will actively search that place and there's no one strong enough there to protect her. She is a princess, every place is dangerous for her except, of course, being with the Straw Hats. After all, she is a member of the crew. Even if some people don't consider her one of the Straw Hats, Oda and the One Piece Wiki say otherwise. Beyond the logical argument in that scene, there's also another hint explaining why Vivi is looking for Luffy. After Egghead, we see a newspaper showing Luffy in Gear 5. According to Robin, the image itself is blurry, like it was taken during Chaos, but the X mark on his arm is perfectly clear. That means the X wasn't part of the original photo, it was added afterward, and you don't have to be a genius to understand who did that. Nefertari Vivi. Morgan's is the only one who could have made that possible. And of course, the X mark is not random. It's the exact same symbol the Straw Hats used back in Alabasta to show their bond with Vivi. It was their way of saying, "You're one of us." That's the moment when Vivi unofficially became one of the Straw Hats. And let me show you something interesting. All the characters who saw the newspaper don't know about this moment. Robin, Frankie, Brook, and Jinbei. These are characters who joined the Straw Hats after Alabasta. Of course, Oda did this intentionally because any of the original Straw Hats would immediately understand the message. Okay, Vivi is looking for Luffy, but how will she find him? Morgans knows that the Straw Hats were at Wano. From there are only 3 possible islands that the Straw Hats could have gone to: Egghead, Elbaf, and the island where Law and Blackbeard fought. They also know that the Straw Hats were at Egghead, which leaves only 2 options: Elbaf and that small island. Even if they go to the wrong island first, they will eventually arrive at Elbaf. But that's not everything. Vivi and Wapol escaped from Marijua, which is very far from Elbaf. Traveling from Marijua to Egghead and searching for nearby islands would take a few days, maybe even weeks, and only 1 or 2 days have passed since the Straw Hats left Egghead. But this is where the small details come in. Time passes much slower in Elbaf. Don't forget the words of the mysterious man, Louis Arnaud, whom we saw at the very beginning of this arc. Do not overstay your welcome here. Even when we last saw Shanks, he mentioned that he had lost track of time. Gaban also believed that only a couple years had passed since Roger died, and Shanks had to correct him and say that it had actually been 10 years. And if until now these were just small hints, in the previous chapters Oda literally confronted by showing the situation at Marijua. When the Holy Knights arrived at Elbaf, the situation in Marijua was already getting worse. Soon after, we heard about a massive fire, and now, suddenly, Marijua is stable again. For us as readers, everything currently happening in Elbaf seems to have taken place within a single day. There is no realistic way that all these updates about Marijua also happened within just 24 hours. Another strong hint comes from when Imu complained that the Holy Knights were taking too long to arrive, even though, from our perspective, they had only been there for a couple hours. Until now, everyone, including me, thought that Oda used this trick so that events outside of Elbaf would progress faster, and by the end of the arc we would get many new updates from around the world. But this is exactly why Oda is a genius. Why wouldn't he use this trick the opposite way as well? Because of the difference in time flow, Vivi, who was very far from Elbaf at the start of this arc, would have more than enough time to arrive here. Also, Elbaf is one of the only places not controlled by the world government. Simply landing there would be a much safer option for Vivi than any other island. On top of that, Morgans is currently openly defying the government and publishing whatever he wants, so Elbaf would be very interesting territory for him as well. Now let's talk about why Oda decided to reveal Imu at Elbaf. Let me remind you that everything happening at Elbaf did not start before the Straw Hats arrived. For example, Alabasta was already under Crocodile's control, Dressrosa was manipulated by Doflamingo, and the Straw Hats went to Wano specifically to defeat Kaido. Even Egghead had build-up with Vegapunk and his conflict with the world government. But Elbaf is different. The Holy Knights appeared suddenly and decided to kidnap children. Of course they couldn't, and that was never Oda's main goal. Oda set all of this up to reveal Imu, and there's also a reason why he needed Imu specifically instead of choosing the Gorosei, which might have seemed more logical. Emu is necessary to push the plot of the story forward, because otherwise, what would be the point of Elbaf? Oda revealed the Holy Knights in Loki and showed us Zebek's backstory, but that alone is nothing unusual. Every arc introduces new characters and backstories, and usually by the end the Straw Hats get stronger, defeat their enemies, and leave with higher bounties. But this is not the case with Elbaf. There is 0% chance that Luffy and Loki will defeat Emu. I've mentioned this in my previous videos, and I'll say it again. This is a common rule across anime. If the villain encounters the protagonist before the final battle, the main characters almost always lose. This theme is even stronger in One Piece. Just look at Crocodile or Kaido, for example. Luffy lost multiple times before finally defeating them. And this villain is not just another antagonist, he is the king of the world. One of the two main candidates for the final villain of the story. What makes this even more intense is that he is alone. One man, who has just been revealed and is supposed to be the strongest, is about to face Loki, the Giants, and the Straw Hats. How absurd would it be if he were beaten up by a group of protagonists this early? Imagine if Madara had been defeated by the Ninja Alliance the very first time he appeared. That kind of thing only happens in comedy. Killingham has already warned the others not to underestimate him. Emu is going to defeat everyone. Luffy, Loki, the Straw Hats, and the Giants. He might even destroy Elbaf, so someone must step in to save them, otherwise the story would end right here. Someone has to join the battle, and for now, there are only two options. Of course, one of them is Vivi, but I also want to talk about Shanks. Shanks is the man whose haki is on the same level as Joy Boy's. Elbaf is under Shanks' protection, and he's been a major part of the entire Elbaf arc. Both Loki and Luffy have mentioned him, and we also saw him in Harold's flashback. The relationship between Shanks and Loki still needs to be explained, and there are even more reasons like Usopp and Yasopp finally meeting each other and so on. Oda has also mentioned that those two will run into each other as well, which could be referring to Shanks and Luffy. But regardless of how epic that would be, there are two reasons why I think it won't happen. The first reason is that Oda is clearly trying to postpone their meeting. Shanks was at Wano and chose not to see Luffy. Later, he sent Dory and Brogy to Egghead and again chose not to go there himself. Yes, now Luffy is in greater danger, so Shanks might arrive, but here comes the second reason. What will happen if Shanks comes to Elbaf? 1. Emu defeats him as well, which wouldn't be surprising but it would feel absurd. 2. The red-haired pirates at least buy time to save the Straw Hats and the Giants, which sounds more logical, but from a plot perspective, it leads to zero real development. It would be exciting for viewers to see this, for all the reasons I've mentioned, but we are already in the final saga. There's no time left just for cool or fan service moments. I'm sure you've noticed how fast the pacing of Egghead and Elbaf have been. Years ago, Oda had no problem spending 15 chapters just to show the fight between Luffy and Katakuri, but now he isn't wasting time, because, as I said, we're in the final saga, and the final war will happen sooner than we expect. And the starting point of that war will be Vivi arriving at Elbaf. There's a clear storyline connecting Emu, Lily, and Vivi. Oda showed us how Emu cut the posters of Blackbeard, Luffy, and Shirahoshi, but kept Vivi's poster for himself. Then, Emu ordered the Gorosei to bring Vivi to him. He clearly needs Vivi for reasons I'll talk about soon. This storyline must be developed, and there won't be a more perfect opportunity than this. Just the fact that Oda showed Emu needs Vivi is already 50% confirmation that he'll get her, and he will get her now. Do you really think Emu will return to Marijua and only later the Gorosei will go out to search for Vivi and capture her? Of course not. Everything will happen now at Elbaf. I'm sure that by the time Vivi arrives, the Straw Hats will have already witnessed Emu's power. They will be defeated, and Vivi will have no choice but to sacrifice herself, making a deal with the devil in order to save Luffy and the others. Vivi is the kind of person who would put a knife to her own throat to protect someone she cares about, while Emu seems like someone who would risk everything just to obtain Vivi. After that, Luffy will become fully determined to take down Emu and the world government. That's how the final war will begin, and it will perfectly parallel the Enies Lobby arc. I'm sure you've seen theories that the New World parallels the Grand Line. For example, Dressrosa closely mirrors Alabasta. Wano has similarities with Thriller Bark. Egghead was heavily influenced by Sabaody, and the final war at Marijua will mirror Enies Lobby. At Enies Lobby, the Straw Hats had to save Robin. In the final war, they will save Vivi. Just like in Enies Lobby, each Straw Hat will have their own opponent, leading to new power-ups and, finally, proper 1v1 matchups. Beyond the Straw Hats, other crews and major characters will also be involved. It might take time to organize everything and form alliances, but good news is that Emu is not going to kill Vivi. She will stay alive, which means Luffy will have enough time. With that, let's move on to the next important question. Why does Emu need Vivi? I've been looking into some old school occult lore, and it actually makes a lot of sense why Imu is obsessed with Vivi. Basically, Imu could be the One Piece version of Lucifer. In many ancient myths and alchemical traditions, a perfect divine being, like Lucifer or the Rebus, is depicted as having both male and female essences in order to reach a state of godhood. Since Imu is presented as a he, but is clearly struggling physically, like we saw him coughing up blood in the recent reveal, it seems like his current body simply can't handle the raw, unholy power of the devil's fruit he possesses. And what if I told you that he might not only be sick outside of Marie-Joie? In chapter 1122, Imu's attendant exclaims, "Imu." Since she isn't an enemy, she must be aware of how much power he holds. I believe this woman is some kind of caretaker, which is why she was so worried when Imu fell to his knees, as if he was experiencing those symptoms again. He has been around for 800 years, and his vessel is starting to fail. The deaths of the Holy Knights and the Gorosei, people who are bound to him, could weaken him even further. We clearly saw something like this during Harol's death. And don't forget Doflamingo's famous words about the national treasure of Marie-Joie. The power has a very short shelf life. It rots faster than you'd believe. This is where Vivi comes in. It's not just about her being a Nefertari, it's about the bloodline of Queen Lily. Imu has been obsessed with Lily since the Void Century, and since her body never made it back to Alabasta, he may still have it or be using it in some way. But to fully complete himself and stabilize his power, he may need a living female host from that specific lineage. I don't think Imu will take over Vivi's body. Luffy fighting a final villain who looks like Vivi would feel very underwhelming. Instead, I think Imu will keep Vivi's body, perhaps in some kind of frozen chamber, and use her blood to enhance or stabilize his powers. That way, Imu achieves his goal, but Vivi remains alive, giving the Straw Hats enough time to fight Imu, the world government, and ultimately save her. That's it for today. Let me know what you think about this theory in the comments, and if you want to learn more about Imu and Lily's relationship, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. Bye.